Today was day 27 in Karen Read's retrial. It was only half a day today, and then Judge Cannoni gave the jury off for tomorrow. So tomorrow is an off day after all. They are ahead of schedule, and tomorrow is supposed to be a very hot day in Massachusetts. So with mounting concerns of how to keep the courtroom cold enough and still be able to hear the witnesses, out of an abundance of caution, Judge Cannoni just decided to let the jury take a day off on Thursday and bring them back on Friday. So Friday is supposed to be a full day. So day 28, join us right back here for the live stream beginning at 9 a.m. for day 28, Friday, beginning at 9 a.m. and supposed to be a full day. Now, despite today being only half a day, we still were able to get through two very important witnesses. The first witness was Brian Lucky Loughran. Brian Loughran operated a plow that night, January 29th, going into the very early morning hours, and passed by Fairview a couple of times. And when he passed by, according to the Commonwealth, John O'Keefe's body was lying right there on the front lawn. So we're going to see and hear from his testimony what he said about what he saw and what his memory was when he was passing by 34 Fairview. But before we get there, first a little bit of background information about Brian Loughran. Brian Loughran is very familiar with the Albert family. He's very close. He was friendly with Chris Albert specifically. In fact, he worked for Chris Albert as a pizza delivery man for Chris's Pizza Store. And he's also very familiar with 34 Fairview. After all, when you have a brother who has a pizza shop, most likely you're going to be eating a lot of pizza. So he delivered a lot of pizzas to 34 Fairview, any party that they were having, etc. So he worked for DPW, the Department of Public Works, as a plow driver for over 20 years. So he's a very experienced plow truck driver. His supervisor would set the schedule, and that morning, January 29th, he was supposed to report at 2:30. Of course, he got there early because he's a good worker, good employee, showed up at 2:15. He was assigned Route 11, which also encompasses Fairview Road. He was assigned also a very special truck, a truck known as Franken truck. And it's not your standard truck, some extra parts that are attached to it, but he's been doing this for 20 years, so he's got no problem driving the Franken truck. Now, something interesting in this trial is that he took a lot of pictures of Franken truck, and he showed what it looked like from the outside, and he also showed from the pictures what it looks like from the inside, and especially the view that you get from the inside to see that you can not only just see it straight in front of you, but you also are able to see on the roads. Now, they also spoke about the extra lights, the plow lights that these trucks have, and showing, and what his testimony was, that the lights are so strong that you're able to see a good 5 to 6 feet to the side of aside from looking straight in front of you, you can also see 5 to 6 feet off to the side. He also adjusted the seat to be very high, and he began on his route. Now, let's hear about what happened when he first came by Fairview Road, and what, if anything, did he see?
How familiar were you with 34 Fairview Road on that day?
Very, very familiar.
Having delivered pizzas there for years?
And then having grown up in that neighborhood.
Were you friendly with the Alberts growing up?
Mostly with Chris, but, I was cordial with the boys.
All right. And when you entered Fairview Road from Cedar Crest for the first time on your route, would 34 Fairview be on your right or your left?
On my right.
And can you give the jury your best estimate of when or what time was it when you first encountered 34 Fairview Road on January 29th of 2022?
About 2:40, 2:45.
Okay, very first time he's passing by 2:40, 2:45, very important time. And according to the Commonwealth, John O'Keefe's body was absolutely lying there, either dead or dying, right in the front lawn of 34 Fairview. So this is his first pass.
That would be AM?
AM.
And when you were passing 34 Fairview Road or encountering it at that point, what did you know about who lived there?
I knew the Alberts lived there, and I knew that Brian Albert was a police officer, first responders.
Now, aside from the lighting on your truck, were you aware of whether there were any streetlights in the area of 34 Fairview?
Yes.
Could you describe those?
Sure. There's one before you get to 34 Fairview driveway, and there's one after Fairview's driveway.
Do you have a memory as to whether or not those streetlights were working on January 29th of 2022?
I do not have a memory of that.
But in any case, how much of the lighting of your Franken truck was illuminated at that time?
All my lights were working.
So you're now driving up Fairview Road, and 34 Fairview's on your right. Taking into account the lighting conditions that existed, especially on your truck, how much of the front lawn of 34 Fairview could you see?
I could see all the way to the front door.
What obstructions were there at the time when you first passed the Alberts residence?
None.
No obstructions. You can see all the way to the front door. No problem at all to see the front lawn.
Were you familiar with the area of the flagpole on the left side of the property?
Yes.
Now, when you are plowing, sir, where is your attention focused?
My attention's focused out the front window, to the right and to the left.
Why?
I am looking for pedestrians. I'm looking for residents that may be backing out, not aware that I'm there, and God forbid, animals.
How much of the time that you're plowing are you scanning the road?
All the time.
Now, as you were passing 34 Fairview, could you see the area of the flagpole at 2:45 in the morning, sir?
Yes.
What was on the ground on the Alberts lawn at that point in the area of the flagpole?
Nothing.
Did you see a 6'1", 216-pound man lying on that lawn?
No.
Now, after plowing,
So he didn't see anything on the lawn. He passed by 2:40, 2:45 in the morning, saw all the way to the front door. He definitely can see by the flagpole, and he did not see anybody there. Definitely not a 6'2", 214-pound John O'Keefe lying there. But then there was some more testimony because he testified that he went down once, turned around, came back again, and still at 2:40, 2:45, that was two passes, and he did not see or notice anything that was out of the ordinary, like a person lying on the lawn. And now he came back again a second time, which again, the first one is at 2:40, 2:45, two passes, and now he's coming back a second time, and we'll see what if you saw anything here. This was at around 3:30 in the morning.
you take the right onto Fairview. Describe for the jury what you see in the road at that point.
As I make my right onto Fairview, I notice that there's a vehicle on the right-hand side roughly in the area of the flagpole in front of 34 Fairview.
Okay. And
So he turns down this is the second time he's coming down for Fairview, and he sees a vehicle parked in front of the flagpole. That's very interesting.
did you make note of what type of vehicle that was?
Yes,
What type of vehicle was that?
a Ford Edge.
Now we know that the Alberts own a Ford Edge.
What direction was that vehicle parked when you saw it?
It was parked nose going up Fairview.
Toward Chapman?
Yes,
So you're coming up from behind it?
correct.
You see the rear of that vehicle?
Yes,
And was it parked adjacent to the Albert property, or was it across the street from the Albert property?
adjacent to the Albert family.
And how close to the area of the flagpole was that Ford Edge parked at 3:30 in the morning?
I can't give you an exact measurement, but looking at the front door, it was about 3 feet to the left of the front door in the area of the flagpole. So in between the front door and the flagpole.
Now, what caused you to remember that there was a Ford Edge parked at 3:30 outside the Alberts residence that night?
For as long as I can remember, they have never parked a vehicle in front of their house. They've always had enough ample parking in the driveway.
So they never park outside on the street, which would also make sense if you see how deep set the house is and the door is. If you park on the street, it's a long walk. If you park in the driveway, it's a much shorter walk, so it also makes sense. And remember, the jury actually did a view of the 34 Fairview. They saw this. So that's why it stuck out to him as odd that the Ford Edge is parked there.
What policies or protocols of the DPW are enforced when vehicles are parked on the street or the road during a snow emergency?
There is no parking allowed. We are supposed to notify our supervisor when there is a vehicle in the way. At that point, the supervisor will make attempt to call the resident or have the police show up at the resident. And then if they can't get the car removed, the car gets towed.
Yep. So during snow emergencies, anyone who's lived in an area where you have a lot of snow, when a snow emergency is declared, you are not allowed to park on the side of the street. You got to park in the driveway. But there's other places where you're allowed to park, but you're not allowed to park on the street. So here we go. We got a violation, but it's his friends, the Albert family, and the influential family, the Albert family. So is he going to call it in or is he not? What's he going to do?
Sir, did you follow protocol that night?
I did not.
Why not?
Knowing the Albert family, knowing that there was a first responder, I gave them respect and opted not to follow procedures.
How did the presence of that Ford Edge parked on the side of the road affect your direction of travel?
I had to go around the vehicle.
How did you maneuver around it?
I had to maneuver to the left, go up, and then maneuver back right into my lane, and then continue up Fairview.
And at any point when you were maneuvering to the left and then angling back to the right, could you see part of the front lawn of the Alberts?
Yes.
Were you able to see any part of the area around the flagpole?
Yes, as I maneuvered back right.
And when you maneuvered back right and saw that area, what, if anything, did you see on the ground in the area of the flagpole?
I saw nothing.
So again, he saw nothing. So he sees the Ford Edge parked there out of courtesy for the Albert family, the influential family, and knowing that Brian Albert is a first responder police officer. So he gave him preferential treatment, something that we keep hearing about in this case for the Albert family. So decided, we're not going to search the house, as we've heard about. And now this is even Brian Loughran, a plow driver, saying, we're not going to give this guy a ticket. We're not going to get him into any trouble. Let's just kind of leave it alone. So he moved around it. However, when he moved around it and he came back again, he did not notice anybody lying on the front lawn. So here we go. That was his second pass. So it was 4 times that he passed by that front lawn where he didn't notice any body lying there. So then he said that he came back about 3 hours later, which is around 6:15, and that's already when the police responded to the scene, and the police blocked off the road. So he started going down the road, but he was not able to, so he had to spin around and leave Fairview Road. Then, you brought out the fact that he was never asked about this at all during the investigation. Michael Proctor had no interest in talking to Brian Loughran, and he said that the first person that approached him was actually a private investigator that was hired by the defense team. And this private investigator was the one who tracked down Brian Loughran and found out all this very important information when you're doing an investigation into the death of a police officer. So nobody contacted him. And then in 2023, he was approached by what we understand is the federal investigators, and they approached Brian Loughran. And then all of a sudden, after 2023, then the state police were interested in Brian Loughran, and they decided to interview him then. So that was essentially the extent of his testimony, and obviously very helpful for the defense. If there's no body there at 2:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, well, then he was probably not hit by Karen Read. And perhaps the argument is going to be that he was put there after 3:30. So that was his testimony. Now, in cross-examination, what was interesting is that Hank Brennan first brought out that there's this blogger. You may have heard this blogger before. His name is Turtle Boy. And this blogger put out some information about you and was trying to pressure you to testify in a certain way, wasn't he? He's trying to expose you if you don't testify in the way that he wants. Isn't that true? And he said that actually that's not true. He was not pressured at all. He was not threatened at all. He does know who the blogger is. He's heard about it. In fact, he even follows Turtle Boy now, but he doesn't listen. At that point, he didn't listen to his podcast. His friends did tell him about certain articles or blogs that Turtle Boy was writing and talking about him, but he did not feel in any way that there was any sort of pressure. In fact, there was a certain conversation that was actually recorded that he found out about, that he wasn't aware that it was recorded, but it was a conversation between Turtle Boy and Brian Loughran, and he wasn't aware that it was recording, but okay, fine. He can do what he wants, according to Brian Loughran. He didn't care that much. But what he did mind, he said it was at a certain point aggravating. He doesn't want the attention. He's not interested in the attention, but he did not find any of the actions that Turtle Boy took as to be encouraging him or threatening him or intimidating him in any way. He just didn't enjoy the intentions. Of course, he's going to be polite if somebody asks him to take a picture with him, or if they want to celebrate him. Okay, what's he supposed to do? Run away? So that was essentially what his response there was. Now, also, they were talking, Hank Brennan was suggesting, well, how many times did you meet with Yannetti? And were you promised anything in exchange for your favorable testimony, any gifts or any compensation? And he said, no, he did not receive any compensation. He did not receive any gifts from the defense for sure. And he's just doing this because it's the truth. He's just saying what he remembers, or specifically what he does not remember, specifically being on the lawn that morning. So he also then pointed out that there were certain reports by the federal investigators, and in the reports, the times are off. So again, Brian Loughran's testimony was that he first passed by at around 2:15, 2:30, 2:30, 2:40, 2:45 in the morning, and then later at 3:30 in the morning. And it seems that the federal investigators wrote down that he was first there at 11:30, 12 a.m., 11:30 p.m., 12 a.m. And also the federal investigator said that he saw the police presence there at 3:30 in the morning, which obviously could not have happened. And Loughran stayed pretty strong to his testimony. He said, look, I don't know what they wrote down. I'm telling you what I remembered. And I told them the truth, which was the same thing that I told you here. So I don't know what they put in the reports. But again, when the reports are different than what the witness is testifying, it's definitely a line of cross-examination that could be explored, which is what Hank Brennan did. So that was just showing some differences in the times that are reported than what he's testifying to now. Now, something else that was interesting that he brought out was this part, and that was about the fact that Brian Loughran is saying that he's very careful about looking always to the sides to make sure that there's nothing out of the ordinary or people backing out of their driveways or animals coming, etc., things like that. He's also always very careful about that. But then he asked him about a dumpster. So this was, I think, a very more interesting line of cross-examination that Hank Brennan explored with him about whether he saw other things that night that may have stuck out to him. So listen to the questioning here.
The Albert House all the way to the door.
Correct.
Do you have a memory of looking at any other houses all the way to the door?
Yes.
Okay. Which house had a dumpster in front of it?
I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to a dumpster. Dumpster wouldn't be in the front yard.
And obviously the point here is that, look, I mean, you're looking around, you would notice something out of the ordinary. You'll notice something that sticks out to you. Don't you think a dumpster would stick out to you? Well, where was the dumpster? Was there a dumpster? And he's saying he doesn't remember a dumpster. So perhaps the suggestion here is, well, if you don't remember the dumpster, maybe you don't remember the person or you weren't really looking. So that was the line here. And I think it was a pretty decent line by Hank Brennan.
Are you sure on your route there's no dumpsters in anybody's front yard?
I can tell you there was a dumpster this week.
No. I'm more interested in January 29, 2020.
I can't answer to that. I don't remember.
A dumpster, a 15 by 20 foot dumpster, that would be bigger than a man's body, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be.
And so you have no really specific memory of the other homes in the neighborhood that night?
I mean, I looked, I saw, I didn't see a dumpster that would have definitely stuck out.
Okay.
So he got him to say, look, if a dumpster would have stuck out and I didn't notice any dumpster. So then what Hank Brennan did later, actually, I don't know why I didn't do this earlier, but what he did later was show him on the dash cam where you can see the dumpster.
Big red dumpster to the right side across from Fairview?
So in case you're just listening to this, you can see in the video that he's showing from a dash cam showing that there's a dumpster on the side there.
Yes.
You can take that down.
So he said, yeah, well, I guess now that you're showing me, then I kind of do see it. So that I think was Brennan's best line. I mean, the other parts about the blogger and the other parts about, you know, the different times in the reports, you know, that kind of fell more flat. Again, it is a decent point to make that if there's reports that are different than what you're testifying to now, it's of course you can argue that his memory is just not that good. Maybe he's making things up. Maybe he's creating memories. You know, that probably be the argument that Hank Brennan's going to be making. But here is, I think, a pretty decent line showing that you just said that you would have remembered about the dumpster. And here we're showing you a picture of this dumpster that was there from the dash cam, and you don't remember it. So, you know, maybe you weren't really paying so much attention, and maybe you kind of missed that there was a body on 34 Fairview. So that was essentially I think the strongest point that he made in cross-examination. So moving on to Karina Kacos. So Karina Kacos is a pharmacist. I think she came across very well as a witness. And her daughter and John O'Keefe's niece were friends. And she was also very friendly with Karen Read. So finally, they got up to what happened on January 28th, 2022. So initially, she went out to eat with Jennifer McCabe and Matt McCabe at a Canton Junction with a lot of other parents also there who were part of the varsity team. And then they went to the basketball game. They watched the basketball game. It ended around 8:30, but she really wanted to go home. She was really done for the night. She worked the whole day. Then she went to watch, her daughter playing basketball, and it was kind of a long day for her. So she was kind of ready to wrap it up and go home. So she went home. And then when she went home, her husband actually was at the waterfall, and her husband was texting her, hey, come join us over here. We're having a good time. Come join us. Don't just, don't be the fun one. Be the fun one and come out and join us and at the waterfall. So eventually, her kids got involved and said, "Yeah, why don't you go out? So, hang out with Dad. Let him eat with you and not eat alone." So she's got guilted into joining them at the waterfall. So she went out to join them in the waterfall. And when she got there, she met Jennifer McCabe, and Jennifer McCabe introduced her to a lot of the Albert family that she knows and is related to. So she was introducing her to the Albert family. And then she was sitting with her husband and enjoying dinner or sitting with him. And she was drinking mostly water. Well, then she was planning to leave. Okay, I did my part as a good wife. I joined my husband out. He's done eating. We can go home now. Well, right when they're planning to leave, that's when John O'Keefe and Karen Read entered into the waterfall. And that's when she decided to stay. She wanted to stay and hang out a little bit more with John O'Keefe and to talk to Karen Read. So she said that John O'Keefe was very happy. After all, his niece just got into the school. And then she, said hi to them. But then she eventually just sat down with Karen Read and really spoke to Karen Read for about 50 minutes. So they're having a great conversation, just the two of them. And then she noticed what Karen Read was drinking. So let's see what she says Karen Read was drinking at the time and whether this had any effect on her. Karen Read, that is. So let's just pull it up here.
I assumed it to be alcohol of some sort, but I'm not sure.
So she assumed it was alcohol of some sort, but she's not 100% sure.
And while you were talking with her, can you describe, was the conversation coherent?
Very coherent.
Was she making sense?
She was.
Was she engaged in the conversation?
She was.
And did you make any observations regarding her sobriety?
She seemed fine to me.
And you're a pharmacist, correct?
I am a pharmacist.
And you were that night?
I was that night.
So Karen Read is very coherent. Remember, this is the end of the night. She's very coherent. She's not talking in slurs. They're making sense. She's a pharmacist. I guess that would mean that she would know if someone's intoxicated or not. But Karen Read seemed fine. And then she also said at the end of the night that she had no concerns of her driving that night either. But let's continue and hear what happens next.
How much interaction did you see that Karen had with John O'Keefe?
They had some interaction.
And was there one specific interaction that stands out in your mind then and today? And I'm talking about a physical interaction.
When they hugged at one point.
Okay. And did John come over to Karen at one point and do something?
He did.
What did he do?
So John went over to Karen and he gave her a kiss on the forehead.
Okay. And that kiss on the forehead, why did that stand out to you?
So honestly, I'd never seen something like that before, a boyfriend do to a girlfriend in public. Never saw that. So it just stood out to me. I was like, wow, that's the sweetest thing I've ever seen.
So she sees John O'Keefe walk over to Karen Read and give her a kiss on the forehead. Now, this is also obviously to substantiate also that everything was great that night. From all the recollections, everybody was happy. There was no tense moments between Karen Read and John O'Keefe. Everyone was in good spirits. But on top of that, then what he did was he showed her the video. We're not going to walk through the whole video, but he showed her the security video where at the exact moment where John O'Keefe walked over and gave Karen Read a kiss on the forehead. And that happened to have been right in front of another very important person in this case. And that is Brian Higgins. So it was right in front of Brian Higgins when he saw this going on. And remember, Karen Read just ghosted him for about a week after they had some sort of flirtatious texts. And that's when Brian Higgins sees. So that's just what he's laying out with this witness. Okay, so then she eventually finishes off her conversation with Karen Read. And again, she seems that she's completely fine. The alcohol is not really affecting her. And I understand the point that they're trying to make here, but I think a lot of people really are going to be completely fine with the idea that Karen Read was above the legal limit that night. She most likely was above the legal limit that night. So she can probably just handle her alcohol very well. And some people can if they're habitual drinkers. So it could be she's still able to have a coherent conversation with somebody and still be above the legal limit, which most likely people are probably believing at this point anyway. But okay, they brought up with this witness that she seemed completely fine and she had no problems with her driving. Well, then the next thing that he showed was this clip of the video where you have Chris Albert, Brian Albert, and Brian Higgins all together leaving the bar. and you probably have seen this video before. If not, it's all over the internet. And this is a moment where it's just very interesting, because it seems that Brian Higgins is trying to motion to John O'Keefe to come with them. Again, this is after the entire night's over. This is when everyone, I guess, was invited to go over to 34 Fairview. And okay, if you want to come, come. If you don't. And here you have Brian Higgins trying to lure John O'Keefe to come to 34 Fairview. And there's some very interesting interactions between Chris Albert and Brian Higgins. And you see there's one point where Chris Albert grabs onto Brian Higgins' hand to put his hand down. Like it seems like Brian Higgins was trying to lift his hand to motion to John O'Keefe to come with them, and Chris Albert grabs his hand and puts it down. And then he grabs it again a second time and puts it down. And then even after that, Brian Higgins moves out of the way, and there's some sort of interaction between him or Brian Albert and Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and Chris Albert, all within the same little circle there. And just, you can't hear anything, and you can just, it's not the greatest video in the world, but you do see this. And then you see after Brian Higgins motioned a number of times for John O'Keefe to come join them outside of the bar, or presumably come with them to 34 Fairview. So it's just a very interesting part of this case, seeing that video and exactly what the intentions there were. Now, of course, the Commonwealth will say, yeah, they're just a bunch of friends saying, hey, come on, join us. Come on, don't be a baby. Come on, join us. So that's probably how the Commonwealth is playing this, but the defense is going to make it seem that, look, this is Brian Higgins, who's very interested in Karen Read. They had some flirtatious texts, and then she ghosts him, and then right in front of his face, he sees some affection between John O'Keefe and Karen Read, and maybe that just stirred up some feelings in him, especially after a couple of drinks, and after the day that he's kind of had. So that's what happened there. And then finally, this was the last interesting part of her testimony, and that was when Jennifer McCabe was leaving with Karen Read, and what seemed odd to Karina. So let's pull this up here. Okay.
So again, it was myself, Jennifer McCabe, and Karen.
So this is when they're leaving. It's them three leaving, and then this is what happens.
Did anything unusual occur when you were leaving?
So as we were leaving, Jen went over to Karen, kind of put her arm around her, and she started saying, you're coming with me, you're coming with me. And Karen's like, huh, like what? Like, where are we going? And
I'm going to sustain the objection.
The first part of that answer, the putting your arm around her, you're coming with me, why did that stand out in your memory?
Just because I was there too, and it just was strange. It was just like, you're coming with me. Like, it was just something that stood out to me.
So it's something that stood out to her. It was a little bit strange. You know, it just felt weird. It felt off that they're walking together, these three, and then Jennifer McCabe puts her arm around Karen Read and says, you're coming with me. And I guess kind of ignoring Karina. It was just felt like socially off, I guess, to her, what was going on there. And that was her testimony. So that was essentially the testimony. That was a few points that she brought out. And that was it for today. So we had Brian Loughran, we had Karina Kacos, and I think it was a pretty decent day for the defense in terms of these witnesses. I mean, Brian Loughran obviously is a very important witness for them. And Hank Brennan's just trying to say, like, look, this is a guy that just doesn't remember anything. He just really doesn't remember. And, you know, he probably wasn't paying attention so closely. He missed the dumpster, probably missed John O'Keefe's body also. And therefore, we can't really rely on Brian Loughran. But I think that he did do a good job in terms of when he was being asked questions about the blogger, about being intimidated, about being encouraging. And he was very strong about that, Brian Loughran. He was very strong that, no, he's not intimidated. He's not being encouraged in any way. He's not scared of anything. He thinks his life's going to go back to normal. He's just trying to do what his part is and say the truth of what he remembers. So, so I think he held his own pretty well in the beginning. And then it's just a question about how much the jury is going to put stock into the fact that he missed the dumpster, as well as, you know, maybe he missed John O'Keefe's body as well. Maybe he wasn't really paying so much attention. So that was what happened today. And that's it. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe and like, and we will see you right back here on Friday morning, 9 a.m. for day 28. We'll see you then.